there was a 40-minute meeting in judges' chambers with the lawyers. And while they were in there, they asked the family, are there any other people that you believe could be heirs that could come forward? And there were 2 people that they identified as possible heirs. And that's where the blood is. That's why they're pulling the blood, and that's what it's for, because there are 2 people.
Are these heirs siblings? We don't know.
From what I was told, went on in that meeting, these are 2 people who they believe could be children.
So they would move ahead of the siblings.
So it's very interesting right now how this all works out. They are trying to identify those people. They have names that they had delivered to the judge, so these people will be tested.
Very interesting. Joining me now, John Hilbert, co-founder of Heir Hunters International, a company that finds missing heirs to estates. Now, you think you might have found someone who might even supersede the siblings. Is that correct, John?
Well, Dr. Drew, thanks for having us. We are an international genealogical heirship firm, like you say, that finds missing heirs to estates. Early on, we found someone who came to us who said, would you help us find missing heirs to estates in this instant? And we were directed to a young man who we felt had his story add up.
John, 1 second. Kevin has a question for you.
I know there's a young man in New York that has been talked about, and maybe is that the young man you're talking about?
No, that's not the person that we have spoken with.
So even another one possibly. And so you use what kind of means to determine whether or not they have a viable attachment to the estate?
Well, what we do is much more than simple genealogy, which we use. We also try to specifically determine under the laws at issue who is entitled to a share of a person's estate. So it changes from state to state. There's a uniform probate code on how intestate succession is treated by the court. So we look at Minnesota law and see who gets what. Now, under Minnesota law, a child or an issue of prince would take it all, and he would trump everybody who is a sibling or a first cousin or even parent.
All right, thank you, John. So if a child does turn up, tell me about that, Kevin, and then the fighting between Tika and Alfred, is that right?
Tika and Alfred. So there is talk that there are 2 siblings, or at least in that judge's chamber, during their hearing, before they let the press in, that is what they discussed, and they identified 2 people, 2 potential heirs. I don't know if he's talking about either one of those people. Meanwhile, with the siblings, you have to understand Alfred, who lives in Kansas City, his half-brother, who, when he was 17, went off to the Vietnam War. He came to the funeral, but did not get in. And he was out in the street in front of Paisley Park while that was going on. And he was very upset about that, and he was upset about his access to Paisley Park. And in a private meeting with lawyers, he asked his prince's sister Tika if he could have access to Paisley Park, and she said, just you, no one else. And he turned to her and said, well, then if it's only me, it's only you and no one else in your family. So they had that little gripe for a while, but they've worked that out about getting access. They've all been in Paisley Park now and been able to have access and see the place and see whatever they wanted to see.
Well, speaking of at Paisley Park, Stephanie Elam is right there. Stephanie, are you familiar with this feud and Alfred's inability to get into the proceedings?
I'm familiar that they've had some struggles, that the siblings have had some contentious conversations, to say the least. I was in the probate court hearing last Monday when you had 5 of the 6 living siblings to Prince who were there. Tika, obviously the one full-blooded relative, and the other 4 and watching them interact, you can tell that there's really not a lot of relationship between all of these siblings. And I think part of the reason is you've got siblings that come from Prince's mom, and you have siblings that come from Prince's dad. But yeah, it doesn't seem like they're all warm and all knowing each other. At one point, I am almost positive I heard 2 of the siblings say, nice to meet you. So they're half siblings, but because they're coming from different sides of the branch, they don't know each other. So it is very much fractured.
And you have to remember, you're talking about the brothers who live in Kansas City. And then you're talking about Tika, who is in Minneapolis, and one of the brothers who wasn't able to be there, he granted all his everything to Tika and the sister, so they took care of everything for him during the court hearing. But it's a very interesting and fractured family, and they're coming together for the first time, and they have to figure this out, because here's the big problem. It's not that you have a chunk of money and they're dividing it up, but but you're looking at assets like all that music in the vault. And someone told me that when they were in the vault 10 years ago, that there were 15,000 songs. So if there's enough, as someone has estimated, for 87 albums to come out, how do you divide that up? How do you figure out who puts that out? Who's in control of that? And that is the big issue right now. It's not the money. They can figure out the money, but they can't figure out the assets. And until any of that money goes out, Drew, they're all
That'll be even
broke.
more interesting if they find out that these are Prince's children, because the children will trump the siblings, and they definitely don't know each other. So how are they going to work out all of those issues? Will be very interesting.
It's so will the siblings have any claim if they're
No, they will be
they'll have
trumped.
no. That's crazy.